afternoon. My name is Shivam, and I am the Managing Director of the CharIN office in India. Welcome to the third edition of the CharIN Tuesday session. Sorry. CharIN is the non-profit association behind the CCS charging standard. We develop the standard, we lobby for it, and we build new features into it depending on the requirements of the market and the OEMs and the customers as they start coming along. Okay, so right now today we are doing a session in terms of understanding the market in the Asia Pacific region, where we will be talking to panelists from India, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Thailand. So welcome to the presentation, and can we have the next slide, please? Okay, so the general instructions for this is, please mute your microphones will be muted by the systems itself. Please use the question window to address the questions, and there will be answer polls. The pop-up windows will pop up during the live poll, so please answer them. Like I said, again, please use the question window to ask all the questions. They will be visible to the organizers and to the moderators, and we will in turn take them and present it to the panelists. Okay, I hope that is fine. Next slide, please. These are the panelists for today's session. We have Allocation from the Energy and Resources Institute. We have Terence from the Electric Vehicle Association of Singapore, Krista from the Electric Vehicle Association of Thailand, and Cliff from the Hong Kong E-Vehicles Business General Association Limited. Okay. Without further ado, let me pass it on to our chairman. Next slide, please. Class Bracklow to deliver the welcome address. Class,
thanks Shivam for introduction, and so I give a very welcome and good afternoon to Asia and good morning from Berlin, and I'm happy to have that ninth format of the CharIN Tuesday to welcome you. I give many thanks to those who dialed in, and especially to the presenters from those four supporting organizations of CharIN from the early stages. And as we have in Europe currently the leading market in 2020 and numbers ahead of China, so I'm really curious to see what happens in the EV arena in Asia, and probably the scope is a bit different as we are going for high power charging, and I see the development for 2-3-wheelers more in Asia. And yeah, I immediately pass back to Shivam. I wanted to say hello to everybody, and I'm proud and happy to be chairman of such a great organization with such an energy in from all areas of the world and with different perspectives, which makes technology mature and helps to secure quality on that. So thanks to all, and I switch back to Shivam.
Thank you, Klaus. That was a brief welcome note. Thank you for keeping us within the time limits. We're actually ahead of schedule. But let me go ahead and welcome the first speaker for the session. Can we have the next slide, please? Yeah, it is Dr. Allocation from the Energy and Resources Institute. I apologize. The title of the presentation is Transition Towards Electric Mobility in India, Initiatives at the National and Subnational Levels. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, so good afternoon to you all. Thank you, Shivam. Thank you, Chairman, for giving us the opportunity to present what is happening in India, and of course, post-COVID scenario, how we are seeing these transitions towards electric mobility. Actually, just to before proceeding to my slides, of course, I have only a couple of slides to mention here. So, of course, this COVID, and this pandemic has created a lot of opportunities in the context of the power system development in the country, and with moving towards the high renewables. as well as there are a lot of opportunities we could envisage in terms of the electrification of the public transport. And when we're talking about the electrifying the transport sector in India, we are well aware of our current mix in the grid electricity, and of course when we're talking about the powering the transport, we'll make sure it has to come from the renewables, which is a cleaner source of electricity at a cheaper cost, so that the socio-economic aspects all been taken into account, and of course it will enable this the smoother transitions towards electric mobility. Shivam, can I request you to bring on my slides I kept and also in the screen?
Yes, sir. Sir, you can simply say next slide, please, and it will be managed from.
Yeah, Shivam, next slide, please. Yeah. So as I told the context, Shivam, can you please go to the next slide? Yeah. So as I told the little bit background of how India has moving towards electric mobility. Of course, one of the key drivers that we have seen in India in the metropolitan cities are largely the air pollution within the city. How to minimize that air pollution, and we also know the electric mobility is one of the drivers. But again, India is a quite vast country, so we are not only depending on the electric mobility, but there are several infrastructure investment being made for developing the high efficient fuel technologies like BS6 that we have currently in place. And we also a little bit moving towards some of the possibility, including the hydrogen and advanced fuels. But here I will very specifically talk about the India's journey so far in terms of the electric mobility, and also how the state, because in India is a democratic country and one of the largest democracy across in the world. So our states also play a pivotal role when you're talking about the implementation of the national level strategies. Shivam, next slide, please. So just bring to attention of all the stakeholders here, kind of ecosystem that India is having. At the central level, there are multiple ministries are coordinating. It is not only a single ministry is coordinating with this program. Of course, at the central level, there are larger policy called FAME 2. Of course, it's a subset of FAME 1, which is initiated in 2014, and now it is restructured as FAME 2. But the Department of Heavy Industry is basically coordinating that. But again, in order to implement the strategy or the program at the national level, there are other ministries like Ministry of Power, Ministry of Road Transport, and Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. So these are the enablers basically to facilitate the implementation of the policy. Shivam, at the next slide, please. So at the state level, as I mentioned, since India is a quite we're having a federal structure as well as in the structure in the state. So even the state has also taken very much proactive approach. If I can say, I will also brief in a couple of subsequent slides. There are almost 15-16 states are already coming up with state-specific EV policies, the electric vehicle policies, in line with the FAME 2, which is there at the national level. Next slide, please, Shivam. Yeah. So there are some certain initiatives been taken at the federal level. One was, as I mentioned, under the FAME 2, with a major focus as per the Indian context or Indian market was given on the two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and the public transportation is also foresee is a opportunity for the electrification, that is on the electric buses. So we are in three sectors: the two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and buses. Our focus is to be in next couple of years. And of course, as we see, the four-wheeler segment is again it's coming up, but India is not, our per capita income and the other things, it's not at match with the United States or the European countries. So maybe in the four-wheeler segment, the market will decide where to go, because there are several other initiatives for efficient, the vehicles, as I told, in terms of BS6. The CNG, the liquefied natural gas, as well as the hydrogen possibility. So those are the initiatives at the central level. So of course, there are several structured initiatives being taken at the ministries of level, like in Ministry of Power. We have a set guidelines for public charging infrastructure, where of course we definitely have incorporated the CCS standards in many of the public charging stations, and the guidelines been published by Ministry of Power, which is also been adopted by another ministry, which is basically talks on deals into the building bylaws. So we mandate, the 20% of the vehicle holding capacity in a city or in the apartment has to be allocated for electric vehicles. So, and of course, there are other incentives or the free weights being given by Ministry of Road Transport. We are having a scheme for green number plate of the electric vehicles, so that is in place, and there is also talk is going on to having the incentive through the parking fees, as well as the exemption of the toll tax and others. So there are very recently Ministry of Natural Gas and the Ministry of MOPNG, basically, which deals into the conventional fuels. So they also come up with a new retail policy, retail outlet policies, where at least one the one unit would be for electric vehicle charging points. I think this is one of the landmark decisions, because we are having thousands of fuel outlets, and also the keeping in mind the fact the conventional fuel companies or the oil marketing companies, the giants, they are also seeing the electric mobility to be coexist in next couple of years in India. So these are the initiatives at the federal level. Shivam, the next slide, please. So at the state level, as I told, there are, of course, this is a FAME 2. Shivam, can you please go to the next slide? So this is when you're talking about the state, Shivam, can you please go to the next slide? The FAME 2, essentially, of course, it talks about more on two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and buses, keeping in mind the current market pattern of the country or India. We are not, our market, it's not so equivalent like what we have in the Western countries. So our policies are very specific to the vehicle segments that we are prominent in India. So at the initiative of the state level, as I told, there are several states have already notified the policies. They talked about various targets and the manufacturing facilities to be created, and some of the states already proactively pursuing these policies. Shubham, can you please go to the next slide? And in addition to the EV policies, there are, so these are some of the which I'm not going in detail because the slide may be very small or the text very small. Shivam, can you please go to the next slide? So apart from this policy at the state level, one of the major push been given by the Regulatory Commission to having a separate tariff category for the EV charging. So around 20 odd states already notified the EV charging tariff. Of course, in some of the states, there are time of use or the time of their pricing is there. But again, we are evolving these sectors. So slowly we'll be adopting the dynamic pricing and the market mechanism for incentivize the EV or the electric vehicle charging for the common people. And as soon as we are moving towards the substantial portion through renewables. At this moment, India is having around almost 120 gigawatt of renewable capacity installed, but we are trying to achieve around 450 gigawatt by 2030, which could be around 60% share in the electricity mix. So we can say the cleaner sources of electricity to power electric vehicles. It is not like what the other countries are following. We are not, we are basically trying to power our electric vehicles through clean source of energy. So these are the, I think, Shivam, the initial slides just to keep set a background for the India. And of course, STEDI is actively involved in some of the studies that we are working with the distribution utility, like impact of the EV charging at the distribution network, how more and more renewables can be incorporated in the power system, is to see the life cycle emission reduction possibility of electric vehicles, not only the tailpipe emissions reduction. So these are some of the activities STEDI is actively involved, apart from the standards development and supporting the BIS. And of course, we look forward to work with CharIN in many more ways in the context of the grid issues, in the context of the specific standards or specific modification that is needed as per the Indian context. So we'll be happy to facilitate that with the government as well as with CharIN in India. So over to you, Shivam. I am not sure whether I've exceeded my time or not.
still have time, sir. You still
Yeah, I
have
think
a
so.
couple.
This is yeah. So this is from my side, Shivam. So I think if you have any specific question, or we will be taking the questions later on in the panel discussion, I guess.
Okay. At this point, I'd like to open the floor for any questions from the audience. But before that, we have some pre-session questions. Maybe I'll just throw one at you, sir. Do you think that battery swapping makes sense for two-wheelers and three-wheelers in the Indian scenario?
Yeah, Shivam, I think this is very good and very prominent question, Shivam. What we could see even in Teddy, we have also undertaken several studies on two-wheelers and three-wheelers. So three-wheelers, with the three-wheelers working for commercial applications, like we see e-rishkas and e-autos in Delhi, in other metropolitan cities, because these rishkas or these three-wheelers are basically working in three shift. They don't want to have a downtime into the road, and because that is basically the model works in India. So in most of the cases, the owner is different, and the drivers are basically taking those autos on rent. So in those cases when we don't need to have much of the downtime, so here we could suggest the battery swapping could be one of the options. But in case of two-wheeler, Shivam, initial stage, I think that is completely depending on the choice to be given to the users, because two-wheelers mostly to be charged at home, because we hardly run around 30-40 kilometers per day, and the two-wheelers, what is current range that is available, it is giving you a kilometer of maybe 60-70 kilometers per charge. I think that is more than enough to charge your two-wheelers at your home premises rather than going for a swapping model. But of course, for three-wheelers, it's a commercial applications. They are maybe constrained for upfront capital cost of the vehicle if you go for a lithium-ion batteries. So in those sense, the battery swapping makes sense. But again, it has to be very strategically defined, or the location of the battery swapping station strategically defined, proper tariff mechanism to be in place, so that it should not create any impact. Because in Delhi, Shivam, we are having two-time peak in the summer months, one in the afternoon and one in the night. So a battery swapping station should be leveraged such that the operation to be leveraged such that it should not create any impact at the distribution network, especially during the summer months, during the peak hours. I think that is one of the advantage of swapping. You can distribute your loading, or you can do whatever point of time of the day when you are having the off-peak power or off-peak electricity tariff. So that is there. So for three-wheelers, we would say it is very much needed. But two-wheelers, I think it's completely based on the user choice, because we are not forcing any mandatory application of swapping there.
Sure. Sir, as a follow-up question to what you just said, you said that the grid will probably see some issues during the peak times. Now, you're primarily from the grid side, so let me ask you this. Do you think the Indian grid ecosystem is currently capable of handling a huge amount of EVs, or, will this be a limitation when adoption increases?
Yeah, Shivam, so if I can say at the national level, the total cumulative impact may not be much, because we are having so much of installed capacity at this moment. We are having around 380 gigawatt of installed capacity of the power. And of course, when you talk about the utilization, we are using half of that. As you know, our peak load not crossed more than 170 or 172 gigawatt, even including the post-COVID scenario as well. So we are having substantial asset unutilized at the national level. But when you're talking about electric vehicles, this charging infrastructure to be incorporated at the downstream of the distribution network, where there is an issue, there would be localized impact. And that localized impact, because our distribution is most weakest link in the entire gamut of the power sector. So that has to be taken into account when we're talking about the planning of charging infrastructure, or having the induction of high capacity battery of buses. So those, and or high capacity chargers rather. So at the downstream, there is an issue. We have studied a lot of distribution network under several distribution utilities. There has been report being published under distribution utility forum from Terry Shivam. We'll be happy to share it. It is also available in Terry's website. So there will be localized impact, and that has to be assessed primarily, and the planning has to be done by the DISCOM accordingly in advance. But there won't be any much issues at the national level per se.
Okay, understood, sir. Thank you for your presentation, sir. Please stay on board. I mean, we will put you up next on the panel discussion. Thank you. This concludes the first session. I'd like to welcome my colleague Jack to take over as moderator for the second session onwards. Jack, can we have you on board, please?
Coming up. Hello, everyone. Hi, Sivam.
Yeah.
There is still one point that we need to go through is the polling question. Is it possible to launch the polling question? All right. So, as a viewer, please give us your honest answer. Do you expect India to become a manufacturing hub for EVs? You have about 30 seconds to think about it. And I think then Dr. Alekia can reply on this result.
Yeah, I would say yes.
Yeah, well, let's see what is the outcome.
Sure. Yes.
All right.
Okay. That is very
That's a
encouraging.
good number.
Nice.
So, this is according to your such a good number.
No, I'm more optimistic now. I mean, it means that I'm missing something in terms of how the future of Indian manufacturing.
Okay. So we need to do more polling questions to make you feel good. We do that. Okay. All right. So now let's go to the next speaker. That's my neighbor, Cliff Wu. He's a committee member of the Hong Kong E-Vehicle Business Association, and also the general manager of the Hong Kong EV Power company. And this company is building charging networks in Hong Kong for the moment, and maybe also in China. I understand that is also happening somewhere in the background. Hi, Cliff.
Hello. Sorry.
Right.
Okay.
I'll disappear. See you later.
Okay, thanks. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Cliff from Hong Kong E-Power, and today I represent the Hong Kong E-Vehicle Business General Association to give a presentation about the EV market situation in Hong Kong. Next slide, please. Next, please. As all may know, Hong Kong is one of the very important financial center in the world, located in the south part of the China. Next slide. And thanks to the very complete road network built by our Hong Kong government, we can easily travel from the south to the north or from the east to the west within 50 kilometers. So, which is geographically, the scales is very suitable for the EV application for the daily life. This. So here shows the composition of all vehicles in Hong Kong. According to the Environmental Protection Department of the Hong Kong government, nowadays there's about 95% of the roadside emission come from the commercial vehicles, which is accounts for 20% of the total vehicles. And mainly, more than 70% of the vehicles are the private cars. Next slide, please. And here in this graph, it shows there's nowadays more than 120 pure electric vehicle models is available in Hong Kong for sales. And you can see the more than 2/3 of the models are private cars. And for the rest, followed by the light goods vans as well as the buses. This. And here shows the trend of the EV in Hong Kong market for the past 10 years. Thanks to the Tesla's Model S launching in Hong Kong since July 2014, there's a very rapid growth in that 3 years from 2014 to 2017. However, there is a very significant cut on the tax concession on purchasing an EV by the individuals, car owners. So you can see there's a great drop just between 2018 and 2017. And as there's more and more new models coming in Hong Kong, just like Hyundai, Ioniq, and Kona, and Kia's Niro, and also some other brands, the growth comes again. And till now, there's more than 15,000 pure EV now registered on the road. This. And as we can see in this graph, actually there's more than 97% of the EV in Hong Kong private car. And actually for the current government, as there's more and more emission come from the commercial vehicles, they have to put more effort in the commercial vehicle, but however, in the market it reflects differently. So that's why we formed our association. Next slide, please. And as we said always, Hong Kong is a very special market. Hong Kong is for the vehicles, we always import from all over the world, from Europe, from US, from Japan. And also we are connected with mainland China. So there's some traffic from China. So we have a lot of different standards available in Hong Kong. And here shows the 3 main standards in AC charging. And in this page, this slide, please. And there's also 3 common standards for the DC charging, as well as there's also Tesla Supercharge and also the domestic charging. There's nearly 8 different types of the charging available in Hong Kong, just one very small spaces. Okay, next slide, please. And as there's normally most of the vehicles in Hong Kong, the used vehicle in Hong Kong are private car, and also the more and more brands imported worldwide are going to use the CCS combo tool in Hong Kong. So the standardization has already naturally goes to the CCS combo tool in Hong Kong, and for the AC charging is the top tool. So we can expect there's some more and more converge in this trend. Next slide, please. Basically, there are some typical types of the charging solution available in Hong Kong, and most likely nearly 30 to 40% we expect have their home charging for their private use, as well as there are some subscription charging service which are available in some residential premises. And there are some actually more than half of the EV owners in Hong Kong actually rely on the public charging station, no matter for the destination chargers, for longer hours charging, and as well as the quick charging solution. Next slide, please. As in this graph, you can see for the public charging infrastructure in Hong Kong, up till now, there's about more than 1,800 chargers are available in Hong Kong with the Mode 3 and Mode 4 speed. And there's 1/3 of the charger available in Hong Kong are just the domestic socket, which is with the rating below 3 kilowatt. Okay. Next slide, please. In the policy side, what are Hong Kong government promoting the EV in the past 10 years? Basically, you can see in the following few slides, most of the policy are just for the subsidy for car purchase, as well as the tax concessions. Next slide, please. And here shows also the tax concession for the private car as well as the commercial vehicles. Next slide, please. And there is also a scheme for encouraging the new building development to build those charging infrastructure when they start to build the new buildings, no matter it is the residential, commercial, or other purpose buildings. Okay. Next slide, please. To further popularizing the EV in Hong Kong, we can see there's actually still a lot of the problems existing. We have to and we have encountered and we have to solve in the future. So we can see the main issue is the land issue. The car parking space in source of car parking space is the main issue in Hong Kong, as well as there's inadequate charging support from the government, or there's no much encouragement scheme by the government to promote the further expansion of the charging network provided by some private sectors. And also the upfront cost of using the EV comparing to the traditional ICE vehicle are still high in Hong Kong, as we all know. We do not have our own automakers available in Hong Kong. We have to rely on those dealerships to import those vehicles from all over the world, and so it may come up to a much higher cost comparing to mainland China and some other area in the world. Next slide, please. So as there are a lot of the different issues still available, still existing as the hurdle to further promote the EV in Hong Kong. And also, we can see the EV is one of the future-proof industry we have to bring into in the Hong Kong market. That's why the Hong Kong e-vehicles Business General Association established since 2017. And under this association, we have also established some other some more committees. One of them is the EV Promotion and Charging Infrastructure Committees. And the main task of this committee is to work proactively with the government and the relevant stakeholders and to explore the constraint of the using EV in Hong Kong and gather all those information, as well as to make some more practical studies and also proposing some recommendation to the Hong Kong government and see there is any possible new scheme or to modify the existing scheme to further promote the EV use in Hong Kong. Next slide, please. The members of our committee come from various different stakeholders, just like the power company, the OEM, as well as the dealership, and also the CPO, and also some other electrical professionals, as well as the academics. Next slide, please. And we, in the past a few years, we have also given some recommendation to the Hong Kong government and to target some main issues. One of them is the high capital outlay for the EVs, no matter for the private vehicles and also the commercial vehicles. For the private vehicles, we suggest the government to further extend the tax incentive or to even enhance the scheme. And for the commercial vehicle, we hope the government will also subsidize a more large scale of use of the electric commercial vehicle rather than just the pilot scheme for 1 or 2 vehicles for a company. Next slide, please. And for the charging infrastructure, as we all know, there's a very inadequate charging support for the Hong Kong people to purchase a vehicle without the charging support. And as we expect, there's more and more EV, the more and more drivers or the car owner, they do not have their own parking space, or for the commercial vehicle owner, they have to move everywhere in Hong Kong. So a very comprehensive and scalable charging network must be built before they can change their vehicle to be the electric vehicles. So we recommend the government to have a short, medium, and long-term master plan for developing the comprehensive public charging infrastructure, no matter by the government's effort or joint hand with those private CPO, as well as they have already have some policy for the new building, but we think it is not enough. Since for the existing policy, they just recommend the building owners to build and provide maybe 30% of the power to support the individual parking space to install the chargers. But we all know in the future, we expect there's 100% of the parking space. Everyone needs the charging infrastructure. So we expect, we recommend the Hong Kong government to further enhance the policy. And also, there's 80% of the total building, the existing building. And there's a lot of problems, just like the lack of the power supply, as well as the lack of space. And so we recommend the government to strengthen and also put some more effort and also financial subsidy to those existing buildings to help them to build a common charging infrastructure in order for the individual to purchase their own car and also install their own chargers. Next page, please. And there's also some more other constraints and challenges that we face. And we also promote a lot of the other recommendations to the government, just like training and also the EV testing, as well as the retired battery treatment. And last page, please. And for our effort in the past few years, the government has have some response to the market needs. They have to put some money for building more public charging stations, as well as they will soon release a 2 billion Hong Kong dollars pilot subsidy scheme to further promote the installation of the EV charging infrastructure in those existing residential buildings, to support those existing buildings, have the EV ready, we call it EV charging ready buildings for the individual to install their own chargers. And also they have reserved also 80 million Hong Kong dollars to subsidize about 40 electric public light buses to run on the pilot program. running for the various route within the 12-month trial. And also they will also have formulate the first Hong Kong electric vehicle roadmap on the popularization of EV in next year, in early next year. So we think with more and more involvement and also more practical recommendation to the government, Hong Kong, I think the total number of the EV will grow dramatically in the coming 5 to 10 years. But of course, it's still a hard time for us to move in this way. Okay, next slide, please.
Thank you, Cliff.
Okay.
I have one question about your presentation. You mentioned that there are about 42 electric buses in Hong Kong. Where are they? I haven't seen any. Are they in the city or in the airport or?
Actually, most of them are for the franchise bus company, and as we heard, some buses has already passed back to the manufacturer due to the performance issue, due to some other operating issues, and also for the trial project, the bus company has just installed those charging infrastructure inside the bus depot, but not in the terminal or whatever. So the use case is quite different to those used in the European country. As we all know, they will build the infrastructure on the route and to maximize the operating hours. But you know, if you just build the charging infrastructure in the depot, every time you have to move back to the depot for charging for 2 to 3 hours, and then maybe every day you have just 6 to 8 hours for operation is not very good for bus companies. You know, in Hong Kong, the license, the driver salaries is high, so they think it's not practically possible for operation at this moment. And also in Hong Kong, we need the buses, the double-decker buses, but most of the supply are just single-decker.
Yeah.
So in the operation sense, the efficiency, the bus company cannot see how they can make the profit to maintain
or
to make this transition.
There is one important point you mentioned is that the charging might take place just in the depot, so in a private area for the buses. But I think it's also important that there would be a kind of a standard coming up that is really the main standard used by buses. Do you see there some evolution that goes to CCS?
Yeah, frankly, in the past few years, the Chinese manufacturer, they has a lot of the selection of the buses which can provide to Hong Kong with the cheap price and whatever, and the charger itself normally come with the buses provided by the manufacturer. And recently, we can see some bus company, they have also tried some models come from Europe or from China with the with the CCS combo charging standard. But I think for the standardization, it still have the some more time to go. Since the bus company, they may have to try some more different model before they can make the decision. And also the method of charging, just like the pantograph charging or the plug charging. Okay.
But since there is not much space in Hong Kong, I would have thought that shared charging infrastructure for bus operators would be the most interesting.
Yeah, and it is also one of the major issue that if just put asking the bus company to do everything is not practical. So the government, they have to also think about how to just like the land issue. It is a very difficult issue in Hong Kong, actually. Okay, for a single land, you have to got a lot of different permission before you can have some infrastructure or buildings built on the road. And as you know, you live in Hong Kong. Our road is very narrow. Okay, it's just next to the building. It's too close to the building. It's not very easy for us to build a very large chargers or even the pantograph charging station in a normal in the city center. So there's a lot of different issues we have to face before we can actually we can move all those electric buses or commercial vehicle to be electrified.
Okay, let's go to the polling question. This is a polling question that comes from Cliff, and I assume it's about battery swapping. And Cliff, I assume that when you're talking battery swapping, it's not battery swapping for small motorbikes, but really for cars or buses, correct?
Actually, both. It is one of the hot topic in Hong Kong we are talking about. Since if the space is an issue to build the infrastructure, is the battery swapping one of the solution we can consider, rather than just a high that may involve a lot of space or it take longer time to make it happen.
Yeah. So let's see what is the poll that is coming out. Oh, all right. So I'm surprised that battery swapping has a future for cars. Okay, I would not have expected that, because the problem is always about the shape of the battery, the size of the battery. That would mean all the car makers or the bus makers, truck makers need to agree on a certain standard. So what do you?
I think it's similar to what we think of, since it's debating. Someone say, okay, there's a lot of difficulties, and someone say, okay, it's the one of the possible future.
Okay,
we don't have the enough space. We can have no choice to just building more charging infrastructure, but we can just replace the battery to extend the range. Okay, and then charge the battery in some other places, not in the center of the city.
Okay, good. All right. Okay. So there is hope. There is a future. All right, Cliff, thank you very much. We will go now to the next speaker. Thank you. So the next speaker is Terence. Terence is the president of the Electric Vehicle Association of Singapore, and he's also the regional manager of Greenlots, which is a technology provider for the charging point operators, network operators, to deploy, manage, and leverage the EV infrastructure. And Greenlots is also wholly owned by Shell New Energies. Hi, Terence. Before we start your presentation, we will directly go for a poll. So the poll is about what is the current EV population in Singapore. So if the polling question could come up.
Right, so this is just a simple question to get things started. Just to talk a little bit about the adoption of electric vehicles in Singapore and where we are along that chart.
Right. So let's see what comes out. It's more of a guessing game. All right, 0.2. Good, trips.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's discover what is the right number.
Right. Okay, sure.
Right.
All right. Thank you, Jacques. Can I have the first slide, please? Okay. So thank you to CharIN Asia for your kind invitation to the EV Association of Singapore. It's always a pleasure to speak at your events. So today I'll be sharing some updates from the EV market this year. And although 2020 has been a roller coaster ride for most of us, and we haven't gotten off this roller coaster yet. There is a sense of collective excitement about the new developments within the industry in Singapore. So hopefully, the players in Singapore, we can survive this roller coaster ride this year and emerge stronger as we start to recover from the post-COVID slump. Can I have the next slide, please? So you might have heard in the news that the Singapore government has made a bold commitment to phase out the internal combustion engine by 2040. So this was made during our annual budget announcement in February. And since, if you are familiar with Singapore's vehicle system, there is this Certificate of Entitlement, or COE for short, which grants the user 10 years of ownership. So with this system, we can expect a gradual phase out of the last of the internal combustion engines by 2030. And thereafter, every new vehicle sold must be electric by 2031 onwards. So this is quite an ambitious plan, but because of that degree of ambition, it allows a lot of the private sector companies to commit towards investing in Singapore. So for example, businesses like Hyundai Motor Group and EV charging companies are willing to invest into growing this new industry. For Hyundai, this new 400 million innovation center is set to produce 30,000 EVs every year by 2025, and the company is planning to sell about 5,000 to 6,000 locally, while having the rest exported, hopefully to our friends in Asia as well. I hope that these vehicles will eventually be used across Asia. So the other recent development is the announcement of more local infrastructure players in Singapore. So this is encouraging because the private sector is willing to invest and operate in this new market, even without the vehicles there. So we look forward to a greater collaboration between the major charging networks, and we need to do interoperability. We need to improve the end user experience for EV charging, and we need to ensure that that is a seamless process. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay. So as you know, very much like the Hong Kong EV Association, the EV Association of Singapore is plays a key role in liaising with the government agencies. So building up the e-mobility ecosystems require a good amount of coordination between the industry groups and the major government agencies. So in Singapore, we have identified that there are 6 agencies that have interest in electric vehicles, and they are for different reasons. The first is EDB. EDB stands for the Economic Development Board. So they are keen on attracting investments. So electric vehicles are seen as a source of jobs, seen as a source of investments, and hence, this is very much worth the effort of EDB to take care of e-mobility. The next one is the National Climate Change Secretariat. So their focus would be more on addressing climate change and CO2 reductions, which are in line with what electric vehicles can bring to any country. The third is the National Environment Agency, whereby they want to reduce the vehicle emissions. So if we are going to phase out the internal combustion engine entirely by 2030, we would need to ramp up our emission standards, and that would be the key mechanism to ensuring that the right vehicle models become available to the end users. The fourth is the Land Transport Authority. So they are the main coordinating agency for all e-mobility related issues. Sorry, I need you to be on the previous slide. I think I'm one slide ahead. Okay, thank you. So the fifth is the Energy Market Authority, which is the regulator for EV charging infrastructure. So as you know, you cannot have the EVs without the infrastructure. And the sixth, and also equally as important, is the Building and Construction Authority. So as we know, the charging stations are moving away from the centralized location whereby you have all the charging stations available for you to, like a petrol pump, right? It's moving into a more decentralized allocation, whereby every building can essentially become a charging location. So the involvement of the building community, the building industry, is critical for e-mobility to take off. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay. So what does this mean for the numbers, the actual numbers? So this table is taken from the Singapore Ministry of Transport as of June 2020. So it shows a breakdown of fuel types on that you can see in the first row, in the first column, and across the different vehicle types as seen in the top row. So the total vehicle population in Singapore, if you can see that the circle, the yellow circle number one, it's that the total vehicle population is about 940K. So before we talk about EVs, I want to talk about hybrids. So hybrids is in the circle number 2. They have been introduced for more than 20 years, but they have struggled to attain even a 5% market share. And this is because of cost limitations of the battery technology used in hybrids. So these battery packs are significantly expensive to service and maintain. And the good news is that the newer lithium-ion batteries that are used in plug-in hybrids and electric vehicles have a cost and performance advantage. And that brings me to the third bubble, which is the total number of EVs is actually 1,911. So it makes up about 0.2% of the total vehicle population. Most of you got it correct, and yeah, thank you for answering correctly. It's quite a close. We have quite a close breakdown, but it does show that even for a small country like Singapore, it is so difficult to electrify. After 10 years since the introduction of electric vehicles, we are only at 0.2%. So we have a long way to go. Can I have the next slide, please? Right. Okay. So despite our slow start, Singapore intends to go from 0.1% EV sales to 100% in the fastest possible time. So in fact, we have 10 years to do so. So we see that there are a few incentives that have been announced. I think that there are 5 main incentives for this to happen. Of course, there are a lot of other incentives, but these 5 will make a crucial impact on the vehicle adoption, EV adoption rate. So the first is the diesel excise duty has been increased slowly, right? So that makes the cost of operating a diesel fleet higher and higher with each consecutive year. Number 2, the Vehicles Emission Scheme, or VES, with rebates has been extended to commercial vehicle, and this applies to vehicle fleets. Why vehicle fleets are so important? Because they are used very extensively. They are used much more than private vehicles. So having commercial vehicles being able to get this vehicles emission scheme is really a big bonus. So this will be effective on April 2021. The third incentive is the early adoption incentive to give a rebate on the purchase of the vehicle with a 20K reduction in price. The fourth is a road tax revision. So the road tax system is actually not perfect in Singapore. The authorities are still going through the fine-tuning process, and I would say that it is a model that is constantly being a work in progress. So right now, it only benefits about 30 to 50% of most EV models, which is a pity because the road tax should in fact benefit 100% of all EVs, right? So hopefully we could get the industry to come together and have a meaningful dialogue with the government agencies to make sure that EV road tax should be fair for electric vehicles. The fifth one is the support of EV charging infrastructure. As we have heard in the previous presentations, EV charging infrastructure is a crucial component. So the government has committed to having 28,000 charging stations by 2020. Do note that this does not include the private sector charging stations. So this is actually a good development because 28,000 will be supported with some extra, hopefully a few more tens of thousands of charging stations, so that the public has a more broader network of charging available. Next slide, please. Now, okay, thank you. So how does the various 5 policies affect the numbers? We can see that from the very first bubble, the green bubble, having the diesel increase to diesel duty increase to 20 cents would mean that a lot of the existing diesel vehicles will be ripe for transition, right? The fleet owners would have to transition towards replacing these vehicles. The next one, electric vehicle adoption will be introduced. That would be benefiting the full electric vehicles. Number 3, the commercial vehicles. Right now in Singapore, we only have 90 of them on the roads. So hopefully with this new commercial VES, that will increase the number a lot more. Number 4, the road tax revision will also benefit the full electric vehicle. And number 5, having the charging infrastructure will of course benefit both the plug-in hybrids and the full electric vehicles.
Terence, I have one question on this slide that comes actually from the listeners. Is you have 231 cars which are other fuel type. Do you have any idea what this other means?
Right. So there are a number of R&D vehicles. So they are actually running on some of them are prototype vehicles. They are running on hydrogen. The other types, they are running on compressed natural gas. So these are the the other variants. I would say that compressed natural gas, the infrastructure has actually been getting lesser and lesser. So it's going to be a struggle for this 231. Eventually, they will have to convert out to electric forms of vehicles. I hope I answered your question, Jacques. Okay.
Yeah, all clear. Thanks.
Right. So can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so this is the last slide. As I mentioned, in Singapore, EVs are still seen as a very niche market. So how do we get from 0.1% EV sales to 100% within 10 years? So besides the active engagement of government agencies, industry players can actually do a lot more. And this is going to be a very long-term play. And there are certain important things to focus on, which will require rethinking about the existing business model and reframing these business models for scalability. So the first, automakers and dealerships. Right now, there are only 18 EV models that are offered by the authorized dealers. And there are very few models for goods vehicles and motorcycles, two-wheelers. So the needs of these customers need to be matched, right? That we provide them with the right models, with the right model diversity, they would be able to adopt EV e-mobility much quicker. So the charging infrastructure also needs to be addressed, especially so for apartment dwellers, right? Singapore has mostly people living in apartments, and the training of sales consultants at the dealerships also will go a long way in increasing the customer awareness. The next part is there has to be investment in the EV battery servicing because we expect that the dedicated battery servicing would have a very high demand. So we encourage dealerships to explore joint collaboration with each other to see how this infrastructure or this equipment can be shared across different companies and be shared across different EV models. The fleets are going to be a key part in this. So with the commercial BES extending to the commercial vehicles, the businesses with aging fleets could benefit in the long run as they get more OPEX savings from running the vehicles. So in addition, there will be more EV leasing options available in the short term as alternative for businesses who do not want to own too many assets. So in order for in order for EV fleets to be viable, businesses will need to use more than just overnight depot charging. They would have to rely on a combination of on-the-go charging and destination charging to supplement their charging needs. The next one is the property owners. Now, we all know that the real estate industry has been severely hit by the pandemic. It will take many years to recover. However, in the long scheme of things, we believe that EV charging infrastructure is seen as a great opportunity for buildings to differentiate themselves from other buildings. So this is a mechanism to draw and retain retail footfalls and visitors and tenantship. And once EV charging is offered as a service, the customers are effectively captured, and they have a few hours to engage in retail activity. So adding value to the building premises. So the more EV charging options you provide, the larger the captive audience there can be. And the last but not least is the opportunity for utilities to offer a wide range of EV options, including fast charging on the go, destination charging, and high-powered charging. So we are starting to see EV charging happening at a much higher frequency as compared to how petrol was consumed in the past. You will wait for your tank to go down to low before you top it up. But now, like our mobile phones, we are seeing opportunities to charge as much as possible so that you do not wait until it goes down to low before you recharge. So this means that any buildings with spare capacity can be a EV charging location. It is my personal hope to see that EV charging become very common, that users are no longer concerned with range anxiety, and they can get, because there are so many options of EV charging, they don't have to think about or worry about range anxiety anymore. The last point that I have is there are some concerns about the ecological impact of EV battery waste. We see that as an opportunity instead for them to be converted into second life battery for smart grid application. So this would be something that 5-10 years down the road become extremely relevant, because the old EVs from 5-10 years ago are going to be scrapped soon, and then we do need to find a way to repurpose all these EV batteries. So with this, I conclude my sharing about the EVs development in Singapore, and I hope this has been useful to you.
Thank you very much, Terence. Sivan, do you have any questions for Terence?
Yes, I do actually. I have one directly from the audience. The question is, will the electricity generation rely on thermal power to achieve the 2030 goal?
Will electricity generation? Sorry, I didn't catch the full question.
Will it be from thermal resources, thermal power stations, or will it be renewable power stations? once you reach
Okay.
2030. So the
Right.
question is, are we actually being green, or are
Sure.
we only shifting some of it to green? This is from the audience, by the way.
Sure. Okay, that's a fair question. And Singapore, we do not have the luxury of renewables. Unfortunately, we don't have sufficient space for solar or sufficient geographical features for hydro or wind. So having said that, our economy is actually based on 95% LNG.
Okay.
Natural gas is the cleanest form of fossil fuel, right? As we all know. However, you know, we do see that it's still a fossil fuel. But there has been many studies that confirm that when we convert the electric vehicle, when we convert the vehicle fleet from ICE to EVs, the carbon reduction is 50%. So we are effectively halving our emissions from road transportations, and that is a significant amount. That 50% will get even higher if we incorporate more renewables in future, when we have more solar, floating solar, for example, or if we have
Offshore
power that's piped in across different parts of Asia that are renewable.
Understood. One more question. What made Singapore so attractive for Hyundai to build an EV R&D center and production site there?
Right. So
Singapore is not a major hub for automotive manufacturing. So is it because of tax policies, or is it because they want to export? So I just want some insight on that.
Right. So I guess there are three main reasons why this happened, and also because of these three main reasons is why Dyson selected Singapore to be their original EV manufacturing plant. And unfortunately, you know, the Dyson's groundwork didn't go to waste. Hyundai was there to pick up the slack and to continue with that conversation. So I guess these three reasons, in my perspective, boils down to advanced manufacturing capability, because the EV assembly will involve a high degree of robotics, of automation, and that includes the EV battery manufacturing, electric motors, and other automotive components like sensors. So these are something that Singapore already has in the capabilities. The second factor is the logistics hub, and because of the many free trade agreements that we have with countries. So this allows Singapore to be a major distribution center within Asia, and that facilitates the transportation of both the unfinished vehicle components into Singapore, and then we do the assembly, and then we have the completed EVs out of Singapore. So that facilitates the two-way movement of goods. The third reason is also on innovation. So we have a strong innovation ecosystem, and this, you know, as we know that this innovation center that Hyundai is setting up will focus on improving AI. They will look at autonomous vehicles. They will look at battery technology and future mobility. So the Singapore's R&D capabilities make it an important part of the value chain of why Singapore was selected.
Understood. Thank you. That's all the questions I have, Jack.
Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sivam. Thank you, Terence. We'll be going now to the next speaker, which is Krishna Utamote.